Anything segment for our Patrons Club, and it is so good to see you. It is Fisher here, your radio root sleuth from Extreme Genes, Family History Radio, and David Allen Lambert, the chief genealogist for the New England Historic Genealogical Society and AmericanAncestors.org. How are you, David?
I'm doing fine. How about yourself, Fish?
All right, hold on. I'm hearing stuff. Let's see here.
Now I can't hear you.
That's what we're getting here. So let's see what we can do to adjust that. And fortunately, we have technical people who are here to help us out at all times. How are you, my friend?
Good, good.
Adjust that. Is that your speaker up there? Is that mine?
Technical people are here. I'm not hearing anything other than what's coming across yours because I get nothing playing in the background.
In here. Let's see if that works now. Can you hear me?
For a bit, though.
There we go. I think we got it.
All right.
So how you doing?
Good, good.
No, now we're getting it back again. So let's see if we. You got me now? Do you have me now, David? Okay. Score. We've got it. We figured it out. Okay, it was the playback. So I'm a technical genius, I guess. I just figured that stuff out. But we've got Peggy here. We've got Amber here. We got let's see, is that you, Joyce? I believe it is. Hi, hi, hi. And everybody's here. We're finally making it with gas today, which is good. Anyway, it's good to see everybody, and it's been a while. Apologies, we couldn't get it done last month. I will tell you right now, I was sick. I was dealing with just so much stuff with upper lung respiratory thing. At one point, I was getting a little nervous. I was going to have to, wind up with a little extra special care someplace, and that was getting a little scary because all the stories, David, that we hear about people and pneumonia and all the things those were turning into. So I appreciate everybody's supporting me on that, and we're going to try to get an extra one in for you this month so we can answer any questions. Hello, Dave Robeson. It's good to see you. Glad to have everybody joining us today. It's been very interesting, David, because you have had a huge find, and we're talking about this on the show, and it has not yet been out on Extreme Genes. It was on the air this past weekend. But David, tell your story, first of all, because this is very fun.
Oh, in regard to the trunk?
Yes.
Well, this is kind of interesting. So I have been in contact with every Lambert from my immigrant, and one family immigrated from Nova Scotia and settled up in Boonville in Oneida County, New York. And I knew that there was a couple of the siblings still alive. By the time I tracked them down, one sibling had died, but there was another one still alive, and I talked to her on the phone, and she was in her high 80s. And her daughter called me and said, making sure it wasn't a scam. And we remained, close friends and, family for the past few years. And her mother passed away. And she called me the other day and said, would you like to have my uncle's World War II footlocker? And, and I'm like, being a military historian, I didn't blink an eye. I'm like, yeah, how do we get it here? So she sent it up. But besides the footlocker, it had a framed picture of his whole regiment, and it has a certificate to the family signed by FDR, expressing his gratitude for his service, and the grateful nation mourning his loss of his death. And the ironic thing is that Roosevelt died a month later.
Right.
But the main thing that got me was this. That's his Purple Heart that he got posthumously. And on the back, it has his name, Douglas A. Lambert. He has the same initials as me, Fish.
Isn't
and
that
I'm the only one in the family that has that combination of initials and is a Lambert.
Wow, and he was a third cousin, right, to your dad or your mom?
Yeah, he's my third cousin. Would be my dad's second cousin.
Second cousin once removed. Okay.
Yeah, well, the generation is kind of weird. Dougie's, as they call him, Dougie's grandfather was my great-grandfather's first cousin.
Okay, we got it. All right. Well, that's an amazing find, and it's always exciting to hear about that. And then I've been doing some more DNA stuff. And I got to tell you, if you haven't started the DNA thing yet, it's amazing how the DNA will help lead you to a paper trail, and then more DNA will further support that paper trail. I mean, it's kind of almost a reverse thing. We had one line on my wife's side, her mother's side, and we tested her mom and her uncle just this past year. And we finally started connecting, and we found a little bit of a paper trail, and now we've been finding all these other DNA matches that support that trail. And so the last few days, I started working on another branch of that same family from Cecil County, Maryland. And it's been a real problem because this particular family had a name that was spelled differently periodically. And we go, well, is that the same guy? The family name was Reth. And there was somebody in there we thought, well, that might be a relative. They went by Ralph. And then they were listed once as Raff. And then I found one today, Reef, R-I-E-F. But we got it back to 1790 now, and the parents for the first time in 35 years. And it started with the DNA matches that, really got us back over to where we needed to be. So it was, a tremendous find. And so I'm really spending a lot of time having a lot of fun with it. But this is one of those days, David, that was the little joy. We have had trouble with the website, with the Extreme Genes. We got some malware on it. We've been battling. And then, between everything else, it's been a little bit stressful coming off of Roots Tech. So anyway, where are your questions, people? We got 4 of you there, and you got two people who have a pretty good idea what they're doing. Be sure to share your questions. We'd be happy to answer those. We want to thank Joyce, by the way, for sending David an amazing camera. Look at how much better David looks, on that camera. And
thank you, Joyce.
It's just absolutely, look at that smile, huh? What a devil. And so hopefully we're sounding a little louder today. It looks like we're having a little issue with the stream, because you sound once in a while, it vibrates or something like that. I don't know what you would call it, but we're working on it. It's getting a little bit better. So anyway, thank you, Amber, for the comments on the finds. And David, show some more of your stuff, by the way.
Oh, sure.
While we wait for questions.
Well, I mean, my sister, Donna, knows I like military stuff. So she decided that I didn't have a German Iron Cross from World War I. So here's a German Iron Cross, but the better part of it is it isn't just for a soldier. It was for someone who was a flyer, a pilot in World War I. So as I say that, I'll bring my World War I plane into the picture. Yeah, no, it's great fun, because I love to lecture about things, but it's nice to have the actual items, especially when you go to see school kids and you pass these things around.
Yeah.
What did I get today? This is a 5-star medal from World War I for combatants who fought in the service for Britain. And on the back, it has the person's name. And on one of the databases on Ancestry, you can research World War I medals. So I now know that this is Robert Larson, and he was with the Royal Engineers.
Wow. Isn't that something? And yeah, we're talking about we're getting comments about the Red Baron. You got the Red medal there. And I think that's good. And Kiara, by the way, Kiara Osborne is saying she's multitasking while she's following us here tonight. And she's just found shared hints on Ancestry DNA and a third cousin. And that's pretty close, Kiara. So
that's pretty good. Yeah, that's kind of like what I got for Dougie for my medal here belonged to my third cousin. So if you get any medals from your third cousin next week, let us know.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, too, with the question is, I guess I have a question for you, Tiara, and that is that third cousin, do you know where that third cousin comes through? Do you know what the line is? And if not, you know, you got the fun ahead to try to figure that out. Simona, hello, welcome. And she says, I'm curious about the total count for Roots Tech that either of you know. I want to say I've heard 25,000. And I think that might be off a little bit from last year, but I'm not sure how accurate the counts are. Any idea, David?
Well, I was hearing 14,000, but then, of course, you know, the last Saturday, there was much more people than that. I mean, It was so much that we couldn't even move sometimes walking through the groups.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it was as jammed up as it was last year.
And if you watch those videos, you will find both me and Fish, because we're camera hams, both being interviewed and jumping in the background to be in the shot.
Well, that's true. I photobombed Jason at one point in there, and they used it in the big video, which was kind of, I was trying to see. He does. Jason was the entertainer who did some hosting there at Roots Tech. He did the hosting. He was the main host. I was the one guy who kind of took over his gig for one thing for a panel because he doesn't have a big genealogy background, so they had me do that one. But he does incredible singing impressions.
Oh,
and I do character voice impressions, as does David. And we were backstage one day fooling around, and I started doing my Jimmy Stewart, because old people always do old movie stars. You know, we do lots of dead people. You ever notice that, David? And so I was doing my Jimmy Stewart for him, you know, and he said, you know, I don't do the voices, and so he was being interviewed outside the media center at one point, and I just popped my head in and I said, hey, ask him to do his Jimmy Stewart. And so they used that in the video later in the show, which was absolutely hysterical. All right, back to our listeners here. Tiara says she knows where the link comes in for the third cousins, so she's dropping her a message.
Great.
And Peggy Jude is asking you, David, because this is your thing in the show, how do you select the blogs you highlight? Or the guests you include? Just curious. Well, that's a two-parter. So you take the blogs, David.
Well, I mean, the first thing I try to do with selecting the blogs is make sure you're actively blogging, because it's one thing for someone to tell me about their blog and they haven't blogged in 2 years. It's not fresh content and get a little dated.
Right.
If it's something that's universally appealing that more people will want to hear about versus something that's just so generic that it has a one person or a small people appeal. I mean, I think you feel the same way about interviews and stories we do for the show, right, Fish?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's important. And we'll actually have a blogger on periodically. So yeah, if you have an active blog and you have something interesting, share it with David. You know, this is the thing when you're doing a podcast or a radio show, you need content. You always need content. So you're always looking. Some of these folks we get to know, they're experts. They're part of the genealogical community. And so they're, as you probably have noticed, they're semi-regulars. We love to have them on. And, you know, we've got Judy Russell, legal genealogist. CeCe Moore has become a very dear friend and supporter of Extreme Genes. And, of course, she's probably the highest profile DNA specialist in the country. And speaking of that, Paul Woodbury is a rising star in that field as well, and we love having him on. But I will also go look for people with a story. In fact, it was a few weeks ago, my wife was watching CBS Sunday Morning, and she says, oh, you got to see this story. And it was this 21-year-old kid who's going around the country interviewing World War II combat veterans, and he's doing like 2 or 3 a day. And she says, you got to get this guy on the show. I said, yeah, I do. So I tracked him down, and we've got him. And he will be on radio this weekend, and then you'll catch him on Extreme Genes a week from Monday. So, but that's, you know, part of it. We're always on the lookout. David's on the lookout. He'll recommend people to me. Mm-hmm. And you know, we're always loading them up. And, you know, some guests aren't as good as others. So we try to kind of figure out, okay, you know, there's some that have an awful lot to share, and we'll do 2 segments with them. And some of them don't have as much, and we'll do a shorter segment. But nonetheless, I never put one on that I don't think is going to be of benefit to anybody. So I hope that answers the question. Simona is talking about Jason. He says he was great. Oh, and so was I. Well, thank you very much, and appreciate that. All right, let's see here. We've got Joyce says, I have ancestors that I believe were Scott-Irish from South Carolina and North Carolina in the 1780s. Ooh, this is a good question for you, David. How do I follow them before that? And I found information on them in a county book at the Family History Library in Salt Lake City. David.
Well, I mean, the Scotch-Irish are a tough batch because you're dealing with not a lot of records in Ireland, and a lot of them were in Ireland for a generation or 2 before they were in Scotland. So the Irish records are in pretty poor shape for that time frame.
Yeah.
So that's tough. You might luck out if you can find a Y DNA match. Like my Lamberts are from Ireland, and we came over in the 18th century, and finding them to connect with that has been helpful. Finding Irish cousins. If it's not, it's autosomal. That's probably going to be pretty clear out of your autosomal DNA by then, because I'm sure it's beyond your 4th great grandparents. But there are genealogies that have been written. Also look for cluster research. Who also is settling in the same area that they are, and see if they came from the same part of Ireland or Scotland, for that matter. Yeah, that's a great answer. And the reality is, David, you've got brick walls. You're one of the foremost researchers in America. You've got brick walls. I've got brick walls. I've broken down 2 of them in the last couple of months because of DNA. And if you were at our DNA panel at Roots Tech, you might have heard Cece Moore talking about the idea that in a few years you could spit in a cup, send it in, and they'll send you your whole line for whatever. Now, I'm very skeptical of this, as I mentioned on Extreme Genes in an upcoming episode, only because of the fact, there are non-paternal events, and it's supposed to happen in like at least one every, 7 generations, David? Something like that. And there are people we just don't know, or there are no records of. And so there's always an issue with that. But I would imagine that there are going to be an awful lot of lines where they just, it's got the artificial intelligence, and it applies it to everything and brings all the known information together. And it's going to come together in that way. So it's an amazing time. But there are brick walls that are really tough to break. And what you just brought up there is sounds like one of them. Okay, so what else do we have here? Peggy Jude, is the radio show and the podcast not the same? Yes, they are. Yes, they are. And I am, why am I not seeing any audio or video right now? I have no idea. I'm going to ignore it and think that you're all there. Amber says, I've been contacting DNA relatives. And let's see, since I've been contacting DNA relatives, I've been having a lot of fun. And I've noticed that I forget who's who, if I've replied, etc. How do you keep track of the contacts? And that is a really good question. For me, keeping track of the contacts is a matter of keeping lists and lots of them. How about you, David? Excel spreadsheet.
Really?
Yeah, I put in the one column is the testing company. The other column is their last name, their first name, the state they're from, and then I put email, phone number, when I contacted, when I didn't hear, but when I heard back from them, and then that way it's like a correspondence log. Okay, yeah, I like that a lot. That's a really good idea. So, a really good question too. I like that. So, we can't have phone calls right now. We're busy. Okay. Next one. Yeah, and Joyce mentions here she did a 111 Y test, so that's pretty strong. That's what really I did. Good. And what was the other thing too? Oh, the cluster thing, the notes section in Ancestry. That's a good one from Kiara. Yeah. I think you're all better at that than I am. Evernote, that's a good one. And Peggy Jude says, with keeping trees on all the DNA sites and on Family Search and WikiTree, along with FTM software, how do I keep them all up?
So what are your thoughts on that, Dave?
Well, I mean, there's no universal way of getting them all updated at the same time, if that's part of the question. The thing is, set a day a month or every other month to, if you're going to upload a GEDCOM and upload your trees, if that's how they are accepting them on the site that you're on, just make sure you refresh and update, or if you just work on one particular line, make sure when you pick a day out of that month that you're updating all of them at the same time, especially new finds that you have.
Well, I wish I had heard that a few years ago. That was really very good advice. Dave is saying, I'm starting a YDNA group for my family Robson's relatives. In other words, it could be Robinson, who are members of the Robinson family Facebook group. Unproven 5th great grandfather migrated south, says my 4th great grandfather, well documented, born 1784 in Virginia, 1812 vet, War of 1812 vet, died in Alabama, 1852. So it's a challenge. Okay, we're here and now. We've got lost audio and video, so I don't know what has happened here. Let's just double check. Have you all lost us? Let's find out.
I can see you fine, Fish, just to
Can you? Okay, I know Dave lost us, so I want to make sure that that we're okay, and we'll continue on for a little while here. Peggy's hearing fine. Let's see. Can you see, Peggy? Oh, everybody can still see. So there we go. Amber's still in there, so everybody's good. So maybe, Dave, all you have to do is refresh and kind of go from there. So I'm not quite sure. Yeah, it's refreshing, apparently, is what the issue is. I wonder why that is, but that's the way it is sometimes with Google Hangouts. Okay. This is really all a great way to go, because everybody seems to be dealing with the DNA thing, Dave.
In fact, I'm waiting for results now. My mother and father, all their first cousins are gone, with the exception of my mother has one first cousin. Luckily, it's a female whose mother is the daughter of my great-grandmother, who died in 1920. So soon I'll have my deceased great-grandmother's mitochondrial DNA. That
is fantastic, isn't it? My question to you is, I've never done mitochondrial DNA.
Yep.
And, you know, there's the issue that with the women, they change their name every generation, right?
They do.
So what do you do with it? I haven't really even looked into it that much or had that many conversations, because obviously the name lines with the Y is a huge thing for people, and autosomal is kind of the universal thing. What do you intend to do with that, and how do you think it will help you?
Well, one thing I do is I want to have a family tree that's mapped out with the haplogroups, both male and female, back to my great-great-grandparents, ultimately. Okay. So it's a triangulation tool, in my estimation. So you might have, for instance, my great-grandmother, I did not know had an illegitimate sister, who I found about a year or 2 years back. And on that, I now can take her female descendants and triangulate them, and we should have the exact same mitochondrial DNA.
Ah, okay. So it's further proof of the line, essentially.
And if I have a guess on who my earliest mitochondrial on Harry Ann Wilkinson Lee's ancestry back in England, she's from England. Yeah. I think it peters out in the 1740s. If I found a woman who I believe is the right one, and I test the descendants of one of her sisters, say from the church records, and I bring it down to a living descendant, they should match.
Wow. Yeah. Okay, so you use it kind of like you would use a Y? Yes.
But just knowing that the surname changes. In fact, it's the most secure line if you can even have, because there can't be a paternity event.
Right? Yes. Well, I had never thought of that. You are absolutely right. I'm wondering if any of you have used the mitochondrial, and if you had, what was your experience with it? Because I think that's really good stuff to know. I mean, one of the things I really love about doing Extreme Genes is how much I learn, not only from our expert guests, but from all of you and the experiences that you have, you know?
Me too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we've run out of questions here. Are you all still in the game? I don't know where I haven't heard anything more from anybody for a little bit. Everybody got kind of quiet, but hopefully we've answered all the questions. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. This was a lot of fun. And David, appreciate you taking the evening. I know it's very late on the East Coast.
That's okay.
And you have a date with the pillow coming up here in a little bit.
Very soon. Very soon. Yes. After I put all the medals to bed.
Absolutely. Hey, we're going to do this again in another couple of weeks. Thank you very much. Oh, wait a minute. We got another couple of questions. There's no reason. This is the beauty of it. You know, in radio, we have set times. We have to be tight and everything. But we're getting a couple more things popping in here. Peggy Jude says, I have no answer. Uncles left, and my parents and grandparents are all gone, besides my brother and sister. How many first, second cousins do I need to test to get a good view of my grandparents? The answer is, Peggy Jude, a lot, from what I understand. Paul Woodbury addressed this. If you go back to the Extreme Genes show from a few weeks ago, I want to say he was saying if you wanted to totally recreate your grandparents,
that's tough.
It's something like 14. Okay, I mean,
and then you have the odds that maybe some of them might have duplicate sets of chromosomes, so you could be having overlap and never even get the full set.
Yeah, yes, that's right. That's why you need quite a few of them, because you know if everybody's within 25% of grandpa and grandma, there's a lot of overlap. But I will tell you, I'm not, don't hold me to that number. And maybe I can look into that. I can see from Paul what that number might be and kind of go from there. But that's a great question. And I've actually dealt with that myself recently and trying to figure that one out.
Sounds like a call to CeCe Moore.
Yeah, maybe so. I'm having her on the show fairly soon as well. But hopefully that answers that question. Let's see here. James Foster, my grandfather, he resided with my great-grandmother. Okay, let's see. Joyce is saying, had a male cousin that was the last chance for mitochondrial on my paternal grandmother's side. So he tested and then died shortly after. That's a good feeling, is it? And I think we've got that all covered. So there we go. Yes, we'll work on CeCe. She'll be on the show soon. She's always on the show, and she always loves coming on the show. And I love her, and she loves me, and she loves David, and we have, just a really good bond and friendship. And it was the strangest thing. The first time I ever met her, I was with David in New York, and we were doing A.J. Jacobs' Global Family Reunion. And CeCe was there, and boy, there's just this big buzz in the room. She walks in, and I said, "Who's that?" And he goes, "That's CeCe Moore," because I wasn't a part of this community for very long at that point. And I went over and introduced myself. Said, "Oh, I know who you are. I love your show." And it's like, yeah, really cool. So that's kind of worked out very well. Anyway, so let's see here. Amber's saying, ISOGG Wiki would have the answer for how many cousins. See how we learn from each other here? I love doing this thing. So again, thank you for your patience the last little while. It's been a real struggle at our end to just keep up with everything. But you guys are the best, and it's fun to hear from this, many of the same people month after month. Tell your friends we'd love to add some more too. And thank you so much. Have a great night. And if you have any other questions, you can always email me. I always answer. Fisher@extremegenes.com. And David too. I know, let's see, it's D.A. Lambert at what, David?
NEHGS.org.
There you go. Anyway, thanks so much, all. Have a great night. Happy hunting. And we'll be in touch again I think in 2 weeks, David. That work for you?
Sure.
Yeah, we just have to put schedules together. So thanks for taking in the short notice, and we'll talk to you again soon.